Following on from my GarageBand for iOS demo where I compared it with its rather more complicated cousin, the Logic Pro X, I thought today would be a good idea to show some workarounds on GarageBands, things that you can't do on the face of it, but you can if you think outside the box a bit here. Now this is of course not lost on the designers of this program. All sorts of things can be done and they've basically allowed you to do it. Here then, to save time, I've got a little GarageBand project, all 4 bars of it. I've got some drums, keyboards, a guitar and a bass, and it goes a bit like this. Okay, so I've got that. Now, the first workaround is to think, how can I get a little bit more sort of distortion or overdrive perhaps on those drums or guitars to make it sound a little bit more crunchy? Don't forget that everybody on earth who has an Apple device has these sounds, so we're trying to encourage individuality. Now, what I'm going to do first is to take the drum track and I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm also going to copy the original drum part and then I'm going to paste it on the other track. So I've got essentially 2 drums that do exactly the same thing. However, with one of them, I'm going to merge the track there. And if I do that, I end up with my drums as an audio file. But notice I've still got the drums as a MIDI file. So I've got 2 drum kits now. I've got this one and this one. So they sound the same. Fine. Now, what I want to do is to put them through a guitar amp to try and sort of make them a little bit more edgy and aggressive. So if I just do that, go back to my main page, I'm going to take the track that I've just merged onto the guitar amp track. Now you can't do this with a drum track because it's MIDI information. You have to turn it into an audio file first. I mean, that's singularly repulsive. However, if I mix these 2 together now, I can add that guitar amp, that sort of distorted version, to the MIDI version. Now, there are a few other sort of complicated ways that you could do this. If I just undo all this now, so I'm just going to go back to my 2. Just going to redo that, redo paste selection. There we go, that's basically back a few steps. I'm only going to take the snare drum and treat it. So if I just edit this out now, I'm going to get rid of all the hi-hats and the crash cymbals. So delete those and then delete that tom at the beginning and also the kick drums. There we go. So I'm just left with snare only. Maybe I want that snare to be a bit crunchy, but I want to leave the kick drum and the hi-hats being quite sort of plain and good quality. So if I now merge the snare drum only, you can see I've just got my snares as hits there. Then I can add my guitar amp and just put the snare drum through that, maybe with a bit of spring reverb. See what happens with that. This is great if you're sort of doing reggae stuff and you want that maybe delay on the snare, maybe that sort of ga ga da dun 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 ga ga ga, maybe that sort of triplet delay. Now I haven't taken the snare drum away from the original MIDI file. Perhaps I could do that. Maybe, but it's quite nice maybe just to retain it until you're really sure of what you're doing, because of course all those snare hits that you wanted, essentially they will disappear because I've merged this. I mean, you can undo lots of stages, but it's a bit of a pain. So that sounds all right to me. You can even, if we just go to settings here, you can change, you can reverse those snare drums. Ooh, let's see what happens with that. If I just go to this split there, because it's obviously done the whole 8 bars, I've got 4 bars of tune, 4 bars of silence, so obviously you'd need to make sure that you get everything in the right place. why not? Why wouldn't you? So I'll just undo that anyway, just so that we've got it as it was. There we go. Now, you can do a similar thing with the Fender Rhodes. I used to have a Fender Rhodes 88 suitcase, and then I needed to buy the vehicle to put it in. Yeah, that was a bit of a nightmare. So if I just listen to the Rhodes on its own, now that sounds like a Rhodes that's just been DI'd into a desk. But with the Rhodes actual piano, leaving aside the suitcase bit, the ones that came with their own speaker system, very often you'd put the Rhodes through a guitar amp to really get that bite. So we can do the same thing again. This time I'm not going to copy it, I'm just simply going to merge that track now, so that we've got the Rhodes, as you can see at the bottom there. If I just solo that out, and then get my guitar amp. Maybe I'd like a Fender amp to put this through. Let's have a look. 50s rock and roll. Yeah, see what happens with that. Just turn the gain down a bit, the reverb up slightly, and now with the Rhodes you'll hear the sort of the trebliness of those tines, which is how the strings work essentially in a Rhodes. It's a bit like tines of a fork or a tuning fork. Oh, I've got some nice delay there. Maybe there's a pedal in front of it. Yeah, there we go. There's an echo pedal. If I just take that off. Now I've just got a bit more bite out of it. It just sounds a bit older. So these are essentially a really good workaround. You can take stuff, put it through guitar amps, that sort of thing. Now, somebody asked on one of my, the last video in fact, he said GarageBand would be utterly complete if I could set the levels for export. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, clearly he's a very good engineer and knows a lot about sound recording, because actually if I wanted to export what's called the stems from this, which are the tracks, stems is kind of a computery word of describing an old tape track. So essentially you're exporting every track that you've recorded for mixing and mastering on another machine, perhaps on a desktop, for example. Now at the moment, if I was to save this, if I was to export this or merge it, it will merge it with a maximum level. This is not always ideal, especially if you've got a vocal track, because you want to be able to use a compressor, you want to be able to maybe EQ, and if you boost any EQ with something that is already at maximum level, you're risking distortion or overdriving of the subsequent plugins that you might have. So there is a way to get round this. Now, if I just record, for example, I'm going to just set my microphone up here, and so I'm going to record a clap that's obviously extremely loud. Now, I've got that clap there now, so it's pretty loud. In fact, it's loud. It's essentially the loudest possible sound that you can get. Now, if I shorten the Rhodes track, and then I bring the clap down to this track, I can then change the gain of this. If I go to settings, I'm going to maybe just bring it down by about -6 dB. That's quite a good rule of thumb. Anywhere between -3, -6, that sort of thing. If you are exporting, it just gives the engineer a little bit of headroom in order to put things on. Now, if I do this, the Rhodes is now going to be quieter. All I've done is I've stored that clap at maximum level. I notice I push the mic gain all the way up just to say that that is the maximum level. And if I now export this track, it won't normalize, it won't bring up that Fender Rhodes anymore, because there's a clap at the end which is already too loud. So that means that if I want to do this, for example, I'm going to actually save the song but export and share the song as just that Fender Rhodes. Now if I do that, share, song, uncompressed, Always leave it uncompressed. Never, never make an MP3 of anything that you want to still work with, because the quality is, of course, not there. Save to files. So that's now exporting the song. Now in a minute, I'm going to bring that track back in to my working space here, and you will see that essentially that clap at the end has made the whole thing, has clamped the level of the Rhodes down a bit. And what I can do is, once the track is in, I can then shave off the clap at the end, because obviously you don't want that on your recording, but it's something you can just put at the end of your song, or even at the beginning. You could just put that loudness at the beginning of the bar and then ask the engineer to just cut that off. Better at the end probably though, so you don't end up chopping anything. So if I now go into my files here, I've got now, I don't know if that's the file that I did. That's actually a previous one that I did. I wonder where that's gone then. Oh yes, gbworkaround1.wav. So, for some reason it's greyed out. Okay. The answer is to try it again. I'm going to try it in another method actually. I've had a problem with the Files app here. So I'm just going to go back in. Now this is another workaround. Of course, if you end up with something that's greyed out, you think, oh, where is it? How can I do something about this? If I just share this once again, share a song, it's quite a good job that these sort of things are happening on camera, because then you can sort of see roughly how to get this sorted. So instead of save to files, I'm going to open in and let it export, and then there should be another workaround to put it in files. I've had one or two issues with the GarageBand file transfer. Sometimes you just think, just renew the iPad, just back up all your stuff and renew the whole thing. Now, this is really important. As I said before, with normalizing files, you need to make sure that there is nothing that's too loud when it gets onto your computer, because you want to have that sort of control. So GB Workaround 2, there we go. So if I go back into my working space, you can see that there's a little icon that says 2 on the files. Now, if I just go back to, for some reason it's created 2 of them. There we go. Now you can see that the level on the one above the bottom track is actually slightly lower. That's quite quiet because we've got that at the end. So there is your way of getting your tracks to be a lower level. So just to reiterate, you get your track, you change the gain of it, you bring the gain down, but leave the one at the end, the separate track of the clap. You can even store the clap sample in your Apple files, so you can just bring it down to every track, and then you've got the control to be able to export that. Now, master track. Let's say we've got our tune ready. Now, GarageBand doesn't have a mastering facility. To this end, I would recommend Final Touch, which is an app manufactured by Positive Grid, and it's fantastic. If you look at the description box below, you can see my video on that. I've done lots and lots of other videos on GarageBand, but there's a couple of workarounds for you to explore and have fun with. It's all in the box.